Take us with you wherever you may roam with the free andrewhogue.com iPhone and Android app. Download today. This is andrewhogue.com, still Australia's first and only 24/7 metal radio station, and it has been a few years between drinks reconnecting with this great man. And it's good to reconnect yet again with Mr. David Vincent, of course, coming to Australia shortly, or this week, for the I Am Morbid Covenant 30th anniversary tour. I can't wait to hear that record in full. Let's welcome David back to andrewhogue.com. Welcome, sir.
Andrew, man, it's great to talk to you again. It's been a hot minute.
Yeah, it certainly has. But again, you certainly haven't slowed down because there's been a lot happening in your world the last several years. And I reckon we'll just kick it straight into, of course, I know a few years back you did the Blessed Are the Sick, 30th anniversary. And now we're into the Covenant realm, which last month was, I still can't believe it. I'm sure you can't as well. 30 years that record came out. Tell us quickly what this album means to you, especially now that you're out there performing it in its entirety night after night. How does it feel just to strap on the bass and just rip through these amazing compositions?
Well, I tell you, it's in hindsight, it's humbling, because I can't tell you that I would have ever thought in all my youthful wisdom 30 years ago that we'd be at this point right now. I mean, the fact that that some of these records are still relevant this long after the fact, speaks volumes. Volumes that I didn't know that we were speaking at the time, but additionally, the fan support has been incredible, and to that, like I said, I'm just humbled that we're able to continue to do, and the fact that I'm still alive is it speaks volumes as well. They say that only the good die young. Well, in my case, that says a lot about me too, right?
Or we could also say the good still stay preserved if they do the right things.
All right. Well, I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
So, as you mentioned about, the fact that the songs do stand up, I know I've talked to several bands over the years from, the sort of earlier death metal era, and I find the difference between that era to now is memorability and songwriting, and I think a lot of that's lost amongst all the technical flash and the amazing sort of glossy productions and things like that. And that's like why I've always said, even talking to you over the years, that Morbid Angel still, to me, are the best songwriters for death metal music, because you remember the songs, the compositions, as you said, they still stand up. So how do you sense death metal today? Do you sort of keep up with bands, and do you hear some sort of influences or impact that you've had from your years with Morbid Angel in some of their sounds? I know Gojira is one big example.
Well, Gojira is a good band. So I'm trying to think about the most eloquent way to answer this question. I don't care for sort of modern production stuff once it gets at the point where when you go to record an album, it's like the band doesn't actually play. It's just sort of bits and pieces, and Pro Tools, and Pro Tools is a wonderful tool if you use it as a tool.
Yep.
Splicing tape and having to just redo stuff so many times and record over the tape is it has its magic, it has its charm. I feel like tape is, from my personal taste, has outlived its usefulness. The machines are incredibly difficult to maintain, blah blah blah. So new era, and there's new tools, and I feel like in some ways Pro Tools has caused people to become lazy when it comes to songwriting and other things, because there's an awful lot of trickery that you can do, and you can create art as well. But then when people do something in the studio that you can't really, you write a check in the studio that you can't cash live.
Yep.
And what that leads to is more and more bands sort of having to play with backing tracks and etc.
And
And
some of them even cancelling because the laptops aren't working. Seen that happen a few times.
well, the thing is that in the case of Morbid, we don't use clicks. We just go up there and play, and it has a sort of an ebb and flow based on a given evening. So if someone's really energetic or really solemn or really the mood of the day translates into the show that you're going to get. So it's not the same. The song list, the set list may be the same, but the songs are going to be probably different tempos. There's going to be sort of ebb and flow between the tracks because we're not on a grid.
Yep.
It's just 4 men up on stage doing what we do. And I would say that as a listener, I prefer that. I mean, I listen to a lot of records, and then when I go they literally a given band wants to literally recreate the exact same sound that they had on the CD. Oftentimes, the only way to do that is with a click track and backing tracks, and it just, to me, that feels a little sterile.
Yeah, and it's almost like the audiences have sort of become accustomed to that. You listen to TV commercials and radio, everything is so perfectly gridded. And when you hear someone or a band that's performing in, I guess, in nature, in the sense of not using the technologies, they're using their natural abilities, people always go, oh, it sounded a little bit slowish, and because our ears are so programmed to perfection today. And I believe to a degree it's also, as you said, sort of makes it so sterile that it's almost like the life is sort of sucked out of these amazing albums that could be amazing if the bands didn't use so much, as you say, the trickery of the tools, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was watching, somebody alerted me to this. I was watching a few videos on YouTube about this very subject. And there was this one guy who took When the Levee Breaks, the song, the Led Zeppelin song, and they had all the tracks busted out, and you listen to that song, that particular beat, and which is, it feels really good. I mean, that particular drum loop has been sampled by just countless artists over the years. And he said, okay, you listen to this and it feels good. He goes, so let's see what's wrong with this. And I'm like, wrong? What's wrong with it? And so he puts it up on a grid and he goes, so this is really kind of all over the place. So he goes, so let's fix it, sort of in the modern Pro Tools way. And he did. And it sounded horrible. I'm like, man, so it just kind of goes to show the more soul that you have in something, and soul that's a human thing.
Yep.
So the more soul that you have in it, that's what feels good to us initially. And then when you put it to a grid, it was like all of a sudden that particular beat, which again has been sampled and used by countless artists over the years, all of a sudden sounded just terrible. I'm like, man, I never thought to do that, but somebody had the track separated somehow. They got them. I guess there's a lot of this you can get online now.
Yeah,
where bands have
really
put some of the stuff up. But anyway, it's just an interesting observation to see. It sort of reminds you what music sort of used to be versus what it's becoming. And now you have AI and all the rest of the stuff that, who knows what the future of that is. I can promise you that I don't care what the future of that is because I won't be using it.
Yep. Yeah, that's another massive subject. But now on a weekly basis, Mr. Vincent, I do full marathons to ultra marathon runs, and people often ask me, what do I listen to? I said, well, it's a combination of the Rocky IV soundtrack and Morbid Angel songs. And there's several songs. It's true. And there's several songs I run to off Covenant. And like I said, just hearing the natural energy from that record is astounding. And I do find my tempos seem to increase in a natural way because I feel natural energy, especially Pete's playing on Blood on My Hands. It's just ludicrous just to hear what he was doing at that era as well. So as you say, it really shows that I believe a lot of that is missing. Some people send me, a lot of latest death metal stuff, which we do feature on the station because we try and keep everything up to date as well. But I do find as a listener, I'm like, oh, it's great. It sounds cool. The drummer sounds proficient. But when I match it against the era of Morbid Angel as an example, still being my favorite death metal band, I just find that there's so much more soul that flows through those compositions versus the amazing glossiness of, home studios that most people
so
are.
sort of modern production. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it is a lot easier. I mean, listen, so just because I have an opinion doesn't mean that I'm right. It just means that I'm subjective. Um, there are new ways, some people grew up and that was the sort of, this is how things are now. It's just that I'm so damn old that, I don't, succumb to, I'm an old dog and I don't want new tricks. But having said that, I think it is a tool that, people can use to express themselves, and it's easier. You don't necessarily have to have, $20,000-$30,000 to go in the studio to make a record, because people can do stuff at home if they use the tools that are necessary.
Yep.
Hopefully people will sort of get back to relying on talent as opposed to relying on technology in order to create.
Yeah, they always say, the live arena is where you really prove yourself, and there are a lot of people that don't want to get out and play live. Okay, there's a lot more work that goes into touring. It's a lot more expensive now, but it really proves when you go and see a live band. Like I said, some bands are like, oh, we better sort of take all that technology with us live, because to a degree, a lot of the listeners, that's what they're expecting. But like I said, the natural element can be lost when you're running everything in the background, so to speak. But that's again for another continued debate. But let's move on. I know recently you've reunited with the mighty Pete Commando. Now in 2015, I was privileged and also at the last minute became drum tech for Pete at the Hammersonic Festival in Jakarta for Terrorizer. And Pete, still being my favorite death metal drummer of all time, was quite an honor to be thrust into the last minute duties of doing that. Now, I also did a really in-depth interview with Peter in his hotel room at the time, and I was well aware that he'd recovered from back surgery and he'd moved into more of a positive religion of choice of what's the word? I guess, he's change in religion. So I did ask him, of course, being an obsessed Morbid Angel fan, did he miss playing any of the Morbid Angel songs, lyrics and, message aside? He said, no, Morbid Angel are a satanic band. So how did you sort of get him to get back on board to say, let's start playing some of these classic songs? And what was his response when you first made initial contact with him to do so for, of course, the Blessed tour, and obviously you stayed on with Covenant, but how was the initial meeting struck up with him?
Well, so as it turned out, Terrorizer, that particular incarnation of Terrorizer, was on tour with Nile in the States. And I just happened to be in town when they were coming through Texas. And I said, I want to go see Pete. I hadn't seen him for too long. And I went to the show, and I kind of said, I didn't tell him that I was coming, and I asked everyone else not to tell him that I was coming. I think they still let on to it. But I saw him, and I just immediately, I watched him play. I watched the whole show, and I missed him. I was just like, man, I really miss this guy. How is this? How did fate lead us to, this point? So we hooked up after the show and sort of talked about old times and had some good discussions. And, I don't know, it was just kind of it was a process. And we had to just, there was a few things that we, kind of discussed and going forward. And, I mean, all that aside, I can only say that it feels really good to reconnect with an old and dear friend, someone who we created a lot of greatness together and lived a lot of our lives together. I mean, we spent an awful lot of time together over the years, obviously.
And just
And both of us sort of perfecting our craft as we go. And these are things that you can't erase. You can't unlive, glory. You can remember it. You can redefine it. You can, life changes and everything else. But we got back together and we started playing again, and it felt so good. And I think it just sort of rekindled our bond and our friendship. That I wouldn't say was lost, but it was kind of, you know, put on the back shelf for a while because we had to continue to do stuff. And like you pointed out, he had, some serious injuries that he had to address. But he's doing really well now, and I'm happy. I'm just happy to be in his presence, and I would imagine that he would tell you the same thing.
Yeah, well, I look forward to reconnecting with him as well. And again, like I said, he's just an unstoppable force and such a highly influential, player in this world. As far as heavy metal, extreme music. I mean, like I said,
No doubt.
he was just the master at that time. And like I said, you wouldn't have what you have now if you didn't have someone like Pete doing what he was doing.
Well,
Laying,
it's not some. Let me correct you on that. It's not someone like Pete. It's Pete because there is no one like Pete.
yeah,
He is a one of a kind individual. There's no doubt in my mind about that at all. And I've really, especially on this tour, uh, I recognize that more than ever.
yeah, he
And
is the master commander.
that's a good thing. That's a
Yeah.
good thing, though.
So let's sort of jump right into. I know you put out a book a couple of years ago, which was called "I Am Morbid: 10 Lessons Learned from Extreme Metal, Outlaw Country, and the Power of Self-Determination." So let's talk about self-determination because that is a fact or a factor of life that most of us aren't taught growing up. Tell us where
Sadly.
tell us where this sort of has come from and helps you through certain areas of your life when you really felt like, I need to really start to, learn about self-determination. Was it at an earlier age you sort of learnt this life skill?
Well, I think it's something that my parents put in me that I don't know that I fully appreciated until sometimes you have a toolbox and you got hammers and you got different socket sets and screwdrivers and what have you, whatever tool you may need to do whatever tasking that there is. So I've always been kind of a hands-on guy and someone who doesn't really take no for an answer unless no is a strict no. I've heard my entire life, you're never going to do that, or you'll never be able to, just sort of like dismissive comments about my dreams from a number of different sources. And I'm like, okay. So I started looking at that. That's almost like the Pepsi challenge, right? You'll never be able to do that. Okay, I'll really watch me.
Mm.
And that became sort of my mantra when people, certainly, definitely in the beginning days of Morbid Angel, when we were initially searching for record deals. I heard everything in the book. Oh, you guys are too fast, or it needs to be more melodic, or there's already another, some other angels. You should change the name. What are these lyrics about? Just any excuse out of the book. And then, so one of these era guys, I'm not going to mention any names because they can't defend themselves. But one of these era guys says, well, they had a laundry list of things. Well, you should do this. I would do this. Or I'm like, okay, so just for purpose of conversation, if I do everything that you tell me to do, what does the offer look like? Oh, well, we're not in an offer state. I'm like, exactly. So
Mm.
basically, there's a bunch of comments coming from a peanut gallery. If they really knew as much as they thought they knew, then probably be in their own band and they'd be super successful. But no, that's not how it was. It was just commentary. So that I dismissed them as much as they dismissed me, and we just continued to do what we're doing, and it turned out to be successful, like we felt it would be, by the way, because we were all very convinced with what we were doing. It just was kind of a new thing, and people weren't accustomed to it yet. Well, as soon as we take off, then all these labels, the very labels who said no to us, were in a race to try to find version 2 of us in another band because we were already, signed.
Hmm.
So this is the kind of stuff where over the years, sometimes, haters are your best fuel for the fire that burns through you, that makes you be that much more recommitted to what you want to do. So that's this whole self-determination thing. I look in the mirror and I know that the man that's looking back at me is going to judge me way more than anyone else in this world ever could. My harshest critic is the man in the mirror, and he tells me what I need to do.
Yep.
That's what I listen to.
Yeah, self-accountability, that's something a lot of people tend to avoid because, yeah, the truth hurts when it's staring right back at you. So,
It is, yeah.
Now let's talk about Vltimas. Now, of course, Something Wicked marches in from 2019, which was my album of that year as well. Stunning effort. I do believe that the album is now somewhat fully tracked, and can you give us a bit of an update on possibly when we can start hearing some new tunes from it, and how's it all shaping up musically?
Well, quite well. We recorded a new record in June. It's currently being mixed, and I'm just getting some test mixes back now, which I'm trying to, have commentary on in and amongst this grueling flight schedule that we've had thus far. But it's the record is done and it's being mixed, and it should be out late first quarter of 24.
Fantastic. And can you give us a bit of an update on how it sort of sounds beyond what Something Wicked came about? How's it sounding? Like, is there going to
I
be some
think
surprises,
I
different
would.
directions?
Well, so I believe that Wicked was a pretty wide record in terms of having, some different tempos and different sort of moods and stuff. This one is wider, so there's a lot. Some folks may be surprised. I'm loving it.
I'm looking forward to it.
I don't want to say anything more because I don't want to give it away, but it's big.
Now, speaking of surprises, people were surprised a few years back when you put out, outlaw country tunes, Drinking with the Devil. And we also know over the years the metal community can at times be a little bit judgmental and also narrow in
Oh,
the
you
sense.
think? Really? What would ever give you that idea?
I don't know. I've just heard a couple of things. And it's like they hold their artists precious and they don't want them to grow and stray and change and things like that. So obviously you put that out and people were like, what the hell's going on here? And again, that takes courage and confidence, and it's a bold move. Igor Cavalera's been doing it for years with his techno stuff with his wife, with Mix Hell and many other projects as well. And of course, there's Nurgle from Behemoth. So tell us a bit about where things are at now for you as far as the outlaw country sort of stuff, and are you finding that you're being respected in a different genre and a different audience where people don't know your current track record of extreme music?
So that it started off as kind of a hobby, and I would say it still is. It's not my main focus. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a metal guy. I've always been a metal guy. But I felt inspired. I met some musicians when I first moved to Texas, and I I had some ideas, and I was like, sort of let's get together. I have a shitload of songs. I just haven't had the time in and amongst everything else I'm doing to have that as a priority. So I've basically probably done about 6 or 7 live performances of that set over the years. I don't have anything on the books for it right now because, again, I mean, Morbid, Vltimas, and a few other things are really taking a lot of priority right now. But I enjoyed it. I think the production's great. I love the track, and more importantly, everybody else. I've sort of been playing it as like bumper music at the live set, and we did that at a festival the other day, and the whole crowd started dancing. So,
do you think they knew who it was performing? Do you think they had an idea that it was Sir David Vincent on the vocals?
Oh, yeah. Pretty much everybody knows at this point.
That means that
I think.
they've moved on to the other
Well,
side.
I don't know. Let me retract that statement. I Many people know, and some folks just get it for the first time, but it just depends. I mean, you know, at least in Texas, a lot of the guys that metal people, they sort of grew up with country around the house because it's what their parents and grandparents listened to it.
Yeah.
So they're not sort of unfamiliar with it. There was this one. We did a show in Austin. Sort of, I only do special things. It's not, I don't take it on the road. If there's like this one thing that, oh, we'd like you to play, I said, yeah, I'll do a country set if that's what you'd like. I said, okay. So there was a lot of other metal bands that were playing, and I went up and did a country set. And there was a couple of fellows that drove down from Dallas to see it. And after the show, they came up, and this one guy said, well, you know, I gotta say that I really, really enjoyed that. I'm like, well, good. I'm glad. And he goes, and I'll be honest with you, I expected it not to be very good. I'm like, well, why would you say that? And he said, well, because you have no history in that kind of music. I said, man, I'm a musician. I live music.
Yeah.
Why does everything have to be so only genre specific and only this and
Yeah.
only that? I want to break that paradigm because I think it's a useless paradigm. And if you make music, you make music. And why does it have to be so genre specific? I don't understand that
Yeah.
because I listen to all kinds of music. You know.
That's that's an interesting comment. I guess it's because you probably thought that, well, you're not known as a country guy, so you don't have the authority to, put out that sort of
The
stuff. You
authority. Wow. See,
need
that's a big word you just used. I don't have the authority to do that.
exactly.
Huh? Okay.
Now let's get quickly back
Goodness.
onto Morbid Angel and your time in the band. I know some people today can look at it as the how do we put it, the Sammy Hagar, the David Lee Roth era. Choose between which version you like, be it the the David era or the Steve Tucker era. So, how do you find that today with people sort of looking at your time versus the current state of Morbid Angel right now?
Um, you know, Truthfully, it's two different bands. It's two completely different things. We have completely different set lists. Um, and if somebody's a fan of both, that's great. I mean, the records that I had nothing to do with have nothing to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't write them. I didn't perform them. So any sort of commentary, good or bad, regarding those records has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
I only I'm concerned with my babies, and other people can be concerned with theirs.
Like I know Richard passed away a couple of years ago, and I'm
Yeah.
sure you've heard recently, but I've seen a lot of stuff with Trey online fishing for rats in the sewer of New York and drunken interviews and collapsing on stage. I mean, wow. Do you find that this sort of stuff, affects the legacy of the band Morbid Angel? Because a lot of people still feel like you're still part of that group, even though you have an era in the group, but just the name resonates, so much history. Do you have a relationship with Trey currently?
No, I don't.
Yeah, interesting times. So, like I said, let's hope that gets the help that he needs because, yeah, it hasn't been too positive just seeing that.
Listen, it's really unfortunate.
Mm,
But again, not my monkey, not my circus.
yeah, understand. Well, let's move on to the tour dates here for the I Am Morbid Australian Tour. It's happening this week. First show is on Friday at the Zoo in Brisbane, and then on Saturday at the Corner Hotel in Melbourne, and on Sunday at the Factory Theatre in Sydney. So what we could do is get you to choose your favourite track from Covenant, another one of your favourite songs from any of the Morbid Angel catalogue that you performed on, and one of your favourite Vltimas tracks.
Well, why don't we start with one that you brought up, Blood on My Hands.
Godly.
And let's see what. Well, that would also be one of my. Shoot, I like the whole damn record. Um, God of Emptiness.
Yep.
Um, let's see. Dominate. Title track from Domination.
It's another one on the running pod. It gets me up the hills.
Right.
As well as Dawn of the Angry. Man, the power.
And let's see, Ultimus. Last ones alive win nothing.
Awesome. And quickly, too, I noticed that you've rejoined Terrorize Us. You want to give us a little bit of an update on how that's, has rehearsals begun? Have new music going to be coming about with that?
Well, we're going to take that one slow.
Okay.
We're doing a few shows, and that's what I have to announce right now. We're doing 4 or 5 shows in South America, and there's no discussion beyond that at this point.
And it will be the World Downfall record being performed?
Correct, and some others.
And I guess while you're on a bit of a roll with these anniversary records, I mean, is this something you'll continue to do? Are we looking at a Domination revisit 30 years in, 2 years' time for 95? 2025, I should say.
There has been some discussion about that. Let's just see how everything plays out. I mean, I don't really like to talk about, birds in the bush when they're in the hand. I love talking about them. So that has been an idea. But again, between all these other things that I have going on, I'm going to see what moves me at the time more than try to be too calculating about this side or the other.
Makes sense. Stay in the present. I think there goes an ambulance in the background.
Yeah, there is. Well, I mean, this is Bangkok is a loud city, so even though the windows are closed and the blinds are drawn, there's still lots of sunlight in here, and there's still lots of noise. So it is what it is. Good
times. Well, great to reconnect with you again, David, and I look forward to seeing these shows in Australia this week. So let's get underway with these amazing heavy metal compositions. I want to thank you for your history and your passion, and helping me rack up those Ks every week.
No, awesome, Andrew, and again, man, it's great to talk to you, and I truly do appreciate all the support that you've shown for me and the music over the years. That's it doesn't go unnoticed.
Absolute pleasure. Let's check out some Morbid Angel music as well as Vltimas here on andrewhogue.com. Thank you, David.
See you soon.